History is written by the victors, but it's often decided by the audacious. Imagine this. It's Christmas night, 1776. Your army is a shadow of its former self, starving, freezing, their enlistments about to expire. Defeat seems inevitable, yet you decide to gamble everything on one desperate roll of the dice, a perilous crossing of an ice-choked river to attack a fortified enemy garrison in the dead of night. This was George Washington's reality at the Delaware, a moment where the American Revolution hung by a single fragile thread. Now, fast forward to 1942. Your nation is reeling, its pride shattered by a devastating surprise attack. You need to strike back to prove you're not broken, but the enemy is thousands of miles away, far beyond the reach of your conventional forces. The solution? A plan that borders on suicidal. Launching 16 B-25 Mitchell medium bombers, land-based aircraft that had never before taken off from a carrier, from the deck of the USS Hornet. With just enough fuel to reach enemy shores, but not enough to return, it was a one-way mission into the heart of the empire. And let's rewind to the myths of legend. A 10-year war has reached a bloody stalemate. Your forces are exhausted, unable to breach the impenetrable walls of Troy. So you pack up your camp, burn your tents, and sail away, leaving behind only a single magnificent offering, a colossal wooden horse, a gift for the gods, or so it seems. The Trojans, celebrating their hard-won victory, pull the monument into their city, unknowingly welcoming their own doom through the front gate. Washington's Crossing, the Doolittle raid, the Trojan Horse. These aren't just stories. They are masterclasses in calculated insanity. They represent moments when commanders, backed into a corner, threw out the rulebook and embraced the unthinkable. What separates such a maneuver from a reckless blunder? Where is the line between strategic genius and catastrophic failure? It's a razor's edge, where victory and annihilation are separated by a single, bold decision. This is precisely why these events are not just historical footnotes. They form the core curriculum at military academies from West Point to Sandhurst. Cadets don't just study the dates and names, they dissect the psychology, the logistics, the sheer nerve required. They learn that warfare is not merely a contest of numbers and firepower, but a battle of wits. The fundamental principles, exploiting an enemy's assumptions, using deception to multiply your strength, and maintaining the element of surprise, are as relevant today on the digital battlefield as they were on the plains of Troy. Today we embark on a journey through military history's most audacious gambits. We will unravel 10 legendary maneuvers that defied all logic, risked absolute annihilation, and ultimately reshaped the world as we know it. We'll begin our campaign in the ancient world, marching alongside Hannibal and his war elephants on their impossible trek across the Alps, a feat of logistics and endurance that brought the Roman Republic to its knees. We'll witness Alexander the Great perfect the feigned retreat at the Battle of the Hydaspes, luring a powerful army into a perfectly laid trap. From there, we'll plunge into the crucible of the Second World War and the Korean War. We'll go behind the scenes of Operation Fortitude, the most complex deception in history, where an army of inflatable tanks and fake radio traffic convinced Hitler that the D-Day landings would happen anywhere but Normandy. Then, we'll sail with General Douglas MacArthur to the shores of INCHON, an amphibious landing so perilous it was deemed a 5,000-to-1 gamble. Next, we'll explore the asymmetric and the unconventional. We will crawl through the claustrophobic labyrinthine tunnels of Cu Chi, a subterranean network that enabled the Viet Cong to launch surprise attacks from directly beneath the feet of a military superpower. We'll analyze the great deception of the 1973 Yom Kippur War, where Egypt's meticulous planning lulled Israeli intelligence into a false sense of security. Finally, we'll bring these lessons into the 21st century. How are the timeless arts of misdirection and psychological shock being adapted for an era of cyber warfare, satellite surveillance, and information operations? We'll examine how a digital Trojan horse can cripple infrastructure and how virtual feigned retreats can lure adversaries into cyber ambushes. From ancient battlefields to the modern domain, these stories prove one enduring truth. In the calculus of war, sometimes the most illogical, most daring move is the one that changes history. By December 1776, the American Revolution was on the verge of collapse. A string of humiliating defeats around New York had shattered the Continental Army. Morale was at an absolute low. Soldiers, underfed and poorly clothed, were deserting in droves, and the enlistments for most of the remaining army were set to expire at the end of the year. The dream of independence was freezing to death in the harsh winter. It was in this moment of profound crisis that Thomas Paine penned his immortal words. These are the times that try men's souls. General George Washington knew that without a dramatic, decisive victory, the war and the nation would be lost. He needed more than a battle, he needed a miracle. Washington conceived a plan of breathtaking audacity, a complex, three-pronged surprise attack to be launched on Christmas night. While he led the main force of 2,400 men across the treacherous Delaware River to strike Trenton from the north, two other columns were to cross further south. General James Ewing would seize a key bridge to block the enemy's escape, while another column would create a diversionary attack. The target was a formidable force of 1,500 Hessian mercenaries, elite German soldiers hired by the British, commanded by Colonel Johann Rall. Intelligence reports suggested the Hessians, confident in their security, would be deep in their Christmas celebrations, making them vulnerable. It was a gamble of the highest order, relying on secrecy, timing, and the enemy's overconfidence. On the night of December 25th, as a brutal nor'easter descended, bringing freezing rain, hail, and snow, the operation began. The Delaware River was not merely frozen, it was a churning mass of ice floes that threatened to crush their fleet of heavy Durham boats. The crossing was a logistical nightmare. Washington entrusted the critical task of getting the artillery across to his 26-year-old chief of artillery, Henry Knox. With booming commands that carried over the roar of the storm, Knox guided the men as they manhandled the heavy cannons onto the ice-slicked boats. The crossing, planned for a few hours, took nearly all night, pushing their arrival in Trenton well past dawn and threatening the crucial element of surprise. On the New Jersey side, the ordeal continued. The exhausted, half-frozen troops began a grueling 9-mile march to Trenton. Many were shoeless, their feet wrapped in rags, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Yet they pressed on, driven by Washington's sheer force of will. They achieved total surprise. At 8 a.m., the Americans descended on Trenton, their artillery clearing the streets while infantry columns enveloped the town. The Hessians, groggy from their Christmas celebrations, were caught completely off guard. The battle was swift and decisive. In less than an hour, it was over. The result was a stunning victory that far exceeded its tactical gains. Nearly 1,000 Hessians were killed, wounded, or captured, including their commander, at the cost of only 2 American soldiers freezing to death on the march and 5 wounded in battle. Washington's risk had paid off spectacularly. The victory at Trenton, followed by another at Princeton just days later, completely reversed the psychological tide of the war. It revitalized the revolutionary cause, secured thousands of new enlistments, and provided a desperately needed infusion of captured supplies. More importantly, it proved that the Continental Army could defeat elite European regulars, transforming despair into hope and demonstrating to the world and to themselves that the fight for American independence was far from over. In the annals of military strategy, few tales illustrate the power of cunning like the Trojan Horse. For 10 years, the Greek army had failed to breach the legendary walls of Troy. A decade of brutal attritional warfare led to a bloody stalemate. Morale was shattered and victory seemed impossible through conventional means. The Greeks needed more than strength. They needed a stratagem so audacious it could bypass Troy's defenses entirely, attacking the city not from the outside, but from within. The mastermind was Odysseus, a warrior whose mind was his sharpest weapon. He proposed a gambit rooted in psychological manipulation. The Greeks would build a colossal wooden horse, a supposed offering to the goddess Athena to ensure their safe journey home. They would then burn their camps and feign a full retreat, leaving this magnificent gift upon the shores. Hidden deep within the horse's hollow belly, an elite force of warriors would wait. The trap was not just the horse, but the narrative of surrender and piety woven around it. The Trojans stared in disbelief at the deserted beach and the solitary monument. A debate raged. Was it a divine offering or a trick? The priest Laocoon famously warned them, "I fear the Greeks even when they bring gifts." He struck the horse with a spear, and the arms of the hidden Greeks rattled within, a sound lost in the crowd's clamor. But when sea serpents emerged and devoured Laocoon, the Trojans saw it as a sign of the god's displeasure with his sacrilege. They made their fatal choice, tearing down their own walls to bring the harbinger of their doom inside. That night, Troy erupted in celebration. The war was over. As the city fell into a wine-fueled slumber, the moment of truth arrived. A hidden hatch slid open. Silently, Odysseus and his men descended from their wooden prison. They were a virus inside the system. They moved through the sleeping streets, killed the sentries, and threw open the city gates. A signal was given to the waiting Greek fleet, which returned with the full force of its army. A civilization was erased in a single night by an enemy they had willingly welcomed. Myth or history, the Trojan Horse is a timeless masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. It teaches that the most formidable defenses can be rendered useless by exploiting an enemy's psychology and biases. This ancient principle is the bedrock of modern covert operations, from special forces infiltrating enemy lines to intelligence agents turning assets from within. Its most direct descendant lives in our digital world. A Trojan virus operates on the exact same logic. It masquerades as a legitimate file, tricking a user into downloading it past their digital firewalls. Once inside, it unleashes its malicious payload. The lesson of Troy echoes through the millennia. The greatest vulnerability is not in the strength of our walls, but in our willingness to believe a convenient lie. In 1805, Napoleon baited enemy forces by leaving his right flank weak. When they attacked, he struck back with a devastating flanking maneuver. The result? A strategic masterpiece at Austerlitz. Misdirection, timing, and boldness rolled together in what's still studied today as the art of battlefield manipulation. Picture bombers launching off a carrier deck with barely enough fuel to reach China. The audacious Doolittle raid of 1942 shocked Japan after Pearl Harbor, proving the US could strike the enemy's homeland and boosting morale at home. A ripple effect of bravery where symbolic strikes mattered as much as physical destruction. Then came Blitzkrieg, fast strikes combining armor and air power to crush defenses before they could react. Yes, it risked overextension, but early on it pulverized opposition and reshaped modern warfare. Hannibal at Cannae doubled down on a risky maneuver, let his center be drawn in, then encircled the Romans. It became a textbook double envelopment, still studied for its bold precision. Korea, 1950. Landing at INCHON against tides, seawalls, and enemy fire seemed impossible. But Douglas MacArthur pulled it off, flipping the war's direction. Unusual? Yes. Effective? Totally. The Viet Cong built intricate tunnels under jungles and fields, allowing them to hide, strike, and vanish. Primitive and effective. Guerrilla tactics like these transformed how asymmetric warfare is studied. Mongols' runaway to win sounds weird, but their feigned retreats baited enemies into traps again and again. A study in discipline, cunning, and seriously smart battlefield psychology. Finally, Operation Fortitude. Fake armies, fake radios, inflatable tanks, fooling Hitler into expecting invasion at Pas de Calais. The real assault happened in Normandy, thanks to deception, a pinnacle lesson in psychological warfare. From icy rivers to underground tunnels, cunning dioramas to psychological ruses, these tactics remind us of the power of boldness, creativity, and misdirection. They defied logic and history. Comment below, which of these tactics blew your mind? Like what you learned? Hit like, subscribe to Next Verse, and ring that bell, because bold stories like these are just the tip of the iceberg.